hello everyone. This is Idle Insights. I am joined by Aaron Evans, who is a writer at in a lot of places, frankly, and has written novels and all kinds of things, but is now writing for us.
Yes,
because we are finding talent and grabbing them and absorbing them into our collective. So
all hail Idle Champions.
All hail Idle Champions. The evil empire. No, yeah. So how did that come about for you? Like, why did you I know this is teasy, but like, why did you decide to join our team? Tell us why you are excited.
Well, I have done lots of little things with Idle Champions. 3 of my characters are in the game, so I've had a lot of really great experiences bringing those together, and then doing Idle Champions Presents. Last year was also another great experience. So when they decided to create the content designer role, I was one of the people they thought of. So Eric Jordan came to me and said, "Hey, we think you'd be really great at this. Would you like to kind of talk about what it would look like and join in?" And turns out it lines up nice with both my kids going to school for the first time. Both of them are now in full-time school, so I have a little extra time. So I was like, oh, that sounds like fun, because I've done a little bit of video game writing in the past, and dialogue's my favorite part, and that's the bulk of it, is making people talk and getting things across. And to befriend your characters. That's true. Did you do terrible things? They are all fine. They're all fine, very happy. Nothing's going to happen to Avalar. So why do you enjoy the dialogue bit the most? I always freak out about dialogue, but I will say I'm very finicky about that in novels, because I'm not going to mention the book. There's a book that is zombie adjacent, and the one problem I have with it is that everyone talks exactly the same. That's a pitfall. I mean, I think that's the thing I like most about dialogue. I love the way people talk, just in general. I love slang. I love dialect. I love learning, new turns of phrase, and just I like listening to the way people express themselves. Why do you choose this word instead of that word? Why did you, frame your sentence this way? And with, especially because English is such a flexible language, you can apply so many things with just syntax and word choice and it may be that other languages are more like this. My experience of other languages is very introductory, where they're teaching you the correct way. But I know that is a feature of English, is that it is very modular in a lot of ways. But I like that a lot, and getting that voice in there and conveying a personality just by word choice, just by what you say or what you don't say. So that part of sort of distilling the story down into the way people talk to each other to me, it's a lot of fun. Like, that's a fun challenge. What's your favorite voice? Like, is there a character that you've written for that you're just like, I can't wait to? For Idle Champions? I mean, for Idle Champions or for your own books. Yeah. My own books. Oh, goodness. For Brimstone Angels, I liked writing Lorcan the Cambion a lot, because in Brimstone Angels, the fact that devils are lawful, I translated into they don't lie, or they don't lie straightforwardly, right? It's you frame it around. So that's always fun, like figuring out how do you say something if you want to tell a lie, or you want to make someone believe something that's not true. How do you do that without just telling them something explicitly untrue, and also just sounding convincing, and when does that break down? Like, when does that when does the anger outstrip the common sense of the devil who says who isn't going to say what he's thinking exactly, but is going to try to convey that. I like that sort of puzzle, the layers of like, what do you say? What do you know you're not saying? What do you not know you're not saying? Right? Because I think for all of us, that's happening. We just don't really put a lot of thought into it, right? We're just talking. So that he's one of my favorites for that. I've done a little bit, and none of the things I've worked on have come out yet. But it is not
spoiler to be like I have written the Idle Champions version of Jarlaxle now, and he's kind of delightful because he gets to be the snarky one. And Minsk is actually a lot of fun because he comes off as a little bit like he doesn't know what's going on, but then he'll suddenly really be the one that knows what's going on, and I mean, that's fun. I enjoy those.
Yeah, I feel like those characters always need a moment of clarity that makes them useful. You can't. I mean, even a broken watch has to be right twice, right?
Yeah, I'm excited for people to see that. You know, I know in video games there's a certain amount of like you click through that to get to the action part. I don't. I always read people's dialogue. Like somebody worked on that, and it's fun. So, but I'm excited. Yeah.
Before we started this conversation, I'm very excited because I got to introduce Asmodeus, which is a lot of pressure because nothing's way more.
Yeah.
Asmodeus is like this. I can't imagine anything more loaded other than playing Strahd, which is like so much worse because Strahd only cares about 3 things and he's out. Right? He's like, will you take over my domain? Are you my lost love? Can I kill my brother a 3rd time? Like that's basically what Strahd's got going on. Whereas Asmodeus, and I'm probably saying it wrong because I say
Asmodeus too.
See, there we go.
We're on the same team here.
Asmodeus. I think Asmodeus sounds cooler, but my mouth hates it.
It's an important part of words, mouthfeel.
Mouthfeel. Okay. Mm-hmm. Wow. What's your fantastic advice about playing devils or Asmodeus or any character that is kind of bigger than life because the expectations are so high?
Yeah, I think for devils in general and Asmodeus. Now I don't know how to say
I
it.
Messed you up.
Asmodeus.
Yep.
Asmodeus sort of as a broad stroke. I always presented Asmodeus as someone who framed himself as I am a god of happiness. Like I am extremely reasonable. And I'm only offering you what you know you already want. Really, if anything is wrong here, it's coming out of you. But I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm saying it's possible. And to me, that's important. Like the way that devils function, they're very reasonable. And especially if they can point at the demons and be like, see that's not reasonable. I'm basically really, this is the best deal you're going to get. I really enjoy that, and I think that's what makes them dangerous. For something like a god, it gets tricky, right? Because you want them to still be something mysterious, and so a lot of times I think the right advice is like less talk, right? Yeah. But that doesn't work as well for someone like Asmodeus, where he's also an archdevil, and so all talk. And I think that's one where if you treat it like a mask, right? The reasonableness is what I'm doing here, but now we see the flicker of the god, and it's something like, there's a thunderstorm behind him, basically, metaphorically. Mm-hmm. Like you don't want to bring the thunder.
Yeah, I'm doing my best, but I do often think of you in your books.
You just like copy paste some dialogue out and just if they're like what, you're like Aaron wrote it.
Well, I can't, but I did look at the wiki, and it still cracks me up that like he is the ruler of the Ruby Rod, and I'm like, Ruby Rod first off is a treasure from Fifth Element, and I'm going to lean into it, but if I'm I'm flirting with the idea of like, I hope no one's watching this right now who is in my game.
B-Dave, cover your ears.
Yeah, Lauren Urban, look away. B-Dave, look away. I think it's very upsetting to always play him good because your players are going to slowly unravel and unhinge. Like they're going to be like, when's he going to do the thing? I'm like,
see, he's reasonable. He's extremely reasonable.
Maybe he's the guy that you have to get to know for 2 years, and then the other shoe drops.
Right.
Like, oh yeah, this is my torture room.
Get people to like agree to burn that kingdom down. Like, yes, that does sound like a really good idea. Because he's just talked you into it.
I've been wondering. I was thinking, I'm like, well, what does he really want? I'm like, oh, he wants the souls. And he doesn't want like good souls because he needs them to get corrupted. So don't kill the good folk.
And what?
Aren't adventures just doing it for you?
I will give you something. You don't have to use it. but this is what I before Wizards closed their novels program, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to think of a second series arc. What I was going to do is have Farida become basically a bounty hunter for Asmodeus.
Ooh,
where he's
nice.
like, listen, you don't like terrible people, I know it. Sometimes I make deals with terrible people and then they start to renege. And what I need is someone to go clean up. And we're on the same side. We're getting rid of a terrible person. How could you be mad about that?
Yeah.
And I always thought that was a delightful idea because it is, again, it's like super reasonable.
It's terrible logic because that's what that's all the adventurers do up till this point, right? Like if you're meeting Asmodeus in D&D, you're probably in the 20th range. Hopefully, I hope for you. And once you get there, you've killed some folks. Some folks probably aren't amongst the living anymore. They were probably bad. Let's assume they were bad. He's all for it. He's your champion.
Plus, if you take out someone who he's done with, right? Yeah. And you do that in front of a bunch of townsfolk, and he's like, just mention you did it for me. Now the townsfolk are like, oh, Asmodeus seems very reasonable. Next time I have a problem, maybe that's who I'm gonna ask.
Yeah, you don't want the fruit to rot on the vine, right? Like it's like, well, that person is evil. Kill them now before they get redeemed.
Right. And this has always been my argument when people talk about, for warlock packs and like Fiendback in particular, people will be like, oh, you sell your soul for magic. I'm like, why are you selling your soul at first level? That's ridiculous. Why are you the devil going, yes, let's do this with you've sold me your soul? Because you're done at that point. Why would you ever come back and give them more spells? Yeah. So once he's got the soul in his pocket, why, at some point you're like, you're more trouble than good. You're a PR disaster now. Let's just take that back because we've already invested enough in it. Let's put it in the coffer. And yeah, so we can all be on the same page. We took out the terrible person.
I think the creepiest thing I ever heard of, and I might have actually, I think I might have heard it from you. I'm not entirely sure, but the idea of investment farming and like just like, okay, I give you a little bit of magic, you're gonna grow it for me, and at 20th level, I'm taking it back.
There you go.
Because you're gonna die. And that's all it is it's just like, I'm just gonna plant a seed inside of you of magic, and then you're gonna get powerful, and go on adventures, and then I'm gonna bring you over here.
Mine now.
Yeah, kind of creepy.
That makes sense.
We're terrible DMs. We have very dark perspectives on players. What
we make them think. That's what it is.
Are there any video games of note that I should know about that you've written for before?
After I left Wizards of the Coast, I worked on the game Terra. It's like an MMO.
I play Terra.
What is the? Yeah, okay, so I went there. I was an editor primarily, but then they had a lot of westernization to do, a lot of text to write. So I did the dialogue for the character Freya, the Elven general with the eye patch and the pipe. Actually, I don't remember if her pipe made it in, but she was great. I loved her. And some other bits. And yeah, it was a good time.
What's kind of like the most stark difference? Because you're not writing necessarily descriptive text. You've got a bunch of champions who are all lined up, and now you're coming up with, you have a shoot your shot kind of moment in Untitled Champions of the funny dialogue.
Yeah.
Right? So like, what's that experience like?
I really enjoy it. And actually one thing that I found that is enjoyable, there's a lot of because the adventures hew pretty closely to like published adventures, right? Rime of the Frost Maiden is a big one. Icewind Dale, the Icewind Dale adventures in Untitled Champions are an ongoing thing. So on the one hand, you have already have a roadmap, kind of what we're going to hit and where we're going to hit it, and there's flexibility there, and there's parts like how do you combine these parts to make it a more linear story, because you can't decide, well, we're going to wander off to this corner. You're going where we're going. But so within that though, you have these characters that are talking to each other, and I think there's a lot of playing D&D that is the interactions between the players and that sort of thing. So finding places to sort of pick up a little character level story and have a kind of like almost like a bit that goes through, I think that's a lot of fun. That wasn't something I would have done in Terra, but it fits really well here, right? There's a lightness and a humor to Idle Champions that I really enjoy, right? It's and it's a humor that comes out of that character interaction more than like the concept, right? The concept is not inherently funny. It's like we're going on adventures and we're killing monsters, but we can like be a little playful in the way we interact with each other.
I'm curious, like how much you get influenced by your own D&D games when it comes to writing, like in the play of it. Because I am old enough to be able to say this, and I think Jeremy Crawford and I also talked about this. The first time I ever was introduced to Dragonlance was Dragons of Despair, and then I read the books. I think the module actually came out before the books,
right?
And which was very confusing to me.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, they made a book out of that, and they did. Technically, all written by one of the same writers. But like, do you find yourself at the table? Do you get distracted with your own group sometimes, and you're like, oh, that was a good moment, I'm going to write this down for myself, or I said something that kind of resonated?
I think not as closely as like the story of Dragonlance, right? Like that's a pretty, like, we took our adventure and we made it a book, which is cool. They're very different. And I know I've talked about before, and I don't know if I've talked about it here. Farida actually was a character in a 4th edition game that I was playing at work. And when the opportunity to sort of write a tiefling book came up, I liked the idea of using elements of her and her story for the book, but they are so different from each other based on what a book needs versus what a game needs, right?
Yeah.
And so it's almost like I think in both of them, she had a twin sister.
Okay.
And in both of them, she's a tiefling. In both of them, she's a warlock. But my character was a Fey Pact warlock because I thought it was cool. But I was like, that's kind of not. That's not going to emphasize the tiefling thing enough, right? Yeah. It's not going to kind of reinforce the story enough. My character was like a different age. She had a very different personality. And so, yeah, and that's the kind of thing. There's stuff I started working on a book that's like such in the baby stages, it's not even worth talking about. That was sort of based on my Dungeon Scrawlers character, because this is another one where I'm like, oh, I can see like a really cool story in here that isn't necessarily our adventures, what's in front of us, because that's another thing is like for a D&D game, frequently the thing you're doing is for everybody like every character is their own main character. Mm-hmm. And you can do things where like you pull one person up and they're the focus character, and you're supporting it. But insofar as how you experience that, you're experiencing that story as almost as if it's a single point of view story for your character. So that means that there are things where it's like, this doesn't fit. It doesn't fit into a novel the same way because it isn't supporting just that. But so I've done that sort of thing. And when you do that, like if anybody's like, I would love to turn my game into a book, there's a certain amount where you sit down and you go, well, what do I really need here? Because you can't take a lot of that. You don't own the IP, but you can take some of it. And then some of it, like you shouldn't bother with. I think other people in the party is a big one where you really have to ask the question, like, can I take this? Does this belong? And what parts of it can I kind of shift into something else? I mean,
I'm very against the Pritchard scale of poetry, or like, a graph of what you can get away with characters, what genre they're in. But it does interest me that like I can get away with certain things as a player character. Mm-hmm. I certainly could never get away with as an NPC, because then they would hate the NPC, or vice versa. I think vice versa. Sorry. A recent example I saw was kind of like how they handled Loki the series versus Loki in movies.
Yeah.
Like they have to like accelerate his kind of not being a jerk, or disassemble that character psychologically in a full episode. I'm just kind of fascinated by that kind of transition of what has to get left behind to serve a story.
Yeah, because if he's going to be the focus, right, you have to have some connection there. You have to feel a vulnerability out of him to a certain degree, because the character that's too cool for school is kind of fun in the background, but they're not the one you're going to follow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that person has to demonstrate a level of insecurity at some point. That's why we don't have a bunch of. That's why Asmodeus is not part of the party.
Oh my god, that would be so terrible.
I mean, that's a great way to start a live play show.
Right.
Well, this is blue 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 and do and Asmodeus.
I brought snacks.
I did something terrible where I made like one of the characters 20th level and everyone was like level 1 or something for one game, and everyone's like, oh god, and like the person who like would cast wish and everything would go wrong, because they were like, I bumped up for 20th level for one game and it was a disaster. You are on a show where you talk about lore.
Yes,
I find it fascinating because I do typically make up my own settings as I go, and I think that is because I am lazy, and I'm very improvisational.
It's a lot of work for
I can
somebody
just
who's lazy.
I feel like it's lazy from like my mind. My mind is just
You're leaning into your strengths, right?
Yes,
You're creating this stuff.
I am chaos, and then I will say I bent all of it totally. Or I mean, I do think about things, but when it comes to lore, there's a weird satisfaction in delving into it and the history of books. And I know that you obviously do this for Champions of Lore quite a bit, and having written for D&D, I kind of do a lot of it. But like I am finding myself, I did this with like when Wildmount came out, and I took my party to Wildmount in Alexandria. I may have hassled the author, and also about like non-important things like, you know, like how many soldiers live in Rexentrum and that guy. Like I just really wanted to know everything, and I'm doing it again with another setting right now where I'm learning everything. What do you enjoy about it? It almost feels like archaeology to me.
It does, right?
Yeah,
I've always felt like there's a certain amount that writing in an established setting and really trying to use the lore and what's come before feels a lot like writing historical fiction. You have to do a lot of research, right? You can't make stuff up because it's still fiction, but you don't want to drop that on top of something important that makes everybody go, hang on a second. And it is really satisfying, I think, to find things that fit between, I always called them like immovable pillars. So this is like, you can't suddenly say all the drow live on the moon. You can't. Right, people would be confused. Right, but like if you need drow to live on the moon, what can you do to make that story fit? And frequently, there is always going to be something where the answer is you can't do that and hold the lore exactly as it is, but almost always I find there's a way to do it, and there's something very satisfying about finding something that fits into that space. And additionally, there's something very satisfying about going, well, there's a thing here and there's a thing here, and I can make a story that fits right here perfectly. To me, that's really, there's kind of a rush in it. It's a puzzle to solve.
I mean, I'm sold, because you go into the Underdark, there are a lot of tunnels. How do you know one of those tunnels is in a portal to underneath the moon?
Right?
In the center of the moon is the Underdark this entire time.
That's where Lolth actually lives.
It's one giant spider egg that's been floating above.
Hey, what a twist. I love it.
That's going to be the plot of Moonfall, everyone. Very exciting film coming out later some year. If you like that one moment where Thanos threw a moon and a planet, you're going to love Moonfall. You're going to have 3 hours of it.
I think too, on like a smaller scale, there's something fun about going through it and just getting hooked by some idea that somebody had, kind of playing off of that and building something engaging. And if you're really into having a very detailed and crunchy setting space, there's places where someone has thought of like almost all these things. I wrote one book in Cormyr, and Cormyr is real established. So like, you can go to different websites and find like, here's the names of every room in the palace and the map. And here's where each noble house is, and here's their family tree. And you don't have to use any of that, but it can kind of be fun to step into that if what you want is to have all those details to pick up. And I think that's one of the nice things about a game like this, is that you can play it on all these different levels.
Yeah.
You don't have to play D&D and ever talk about Cormyr. You don't even have to have Cormyr exist in your game. You can decide to take 3 elements and spin something cool up, or you can, go use these pre-established details. And those are all different choices under the same umbrella.
Right. And it also prevents things from also getting too meta if you've been working with like D&D players who have been playing for a long time.
Yeah.
Because there are so many versions. Some of these wikis, I'm like, wow, every edition, they're just like, let's start again.
There's definitely, I feel like you definitely can see the ghosts of different kinds of creators, because I think there are some people who really like to like make sure they kind of grab all the nodes and like pull something new together with it. And there are some people who are like, can I just slide between these? And there are some people who are like, I made this, bye. And then you kind of have, I mean, in a certain sense, those are fun too, because if someone said this and then someone else said this and they can't both be true, can you find a way to make them both true? Can you spin something up that fits between these seemingly impossible truths? Like they can't both be true. Well, what if you turn it sideways? Are they true? What if this person who conveyed this truth was mistaken about this element? Or what if these are both stories and they're coming from places that are farther out? What could happen that would produce both of those things? Like it's a fun experiment, I find. And so the times that I bumped into those kinds of issues within the lore, like it's kind of exciting. It's a fun thing to unpick. It's not everybody's jam, obviously, but I would say people should give it a try, because it's quite enjoyable if you're into it.
You had a dramatic effect on tieflings, and coming from like Planescape, originally that they were just kind of planar touched, but tieflings are very well defined now and so incredibly popular. And certainly, that's for a lot of reasons. But I was fascinated by how much like Critical Role audiences, because 2 characters ended up being tieflings, just grabbed onto it. And tieflings are like probably one of the most cosplayed things I now see every time I go to a convention. I'm very thankful for that. Other than other creatures, but what do you think? What's the appeal, do you think, for so many people?
I think there's a little bit, like if I had to guess, I'd say that a part of it is that there's an implication of a struggle. Like there's already there's a character thing built in. I feel like this is what, like, I remember, back before you'd have people who'd have half elves, and half elves, you want them to represent the struggle between human and elf. And it's tricky to pull off, because it's like, oh no, I'm a little prettier and I live longer, and it's very hard. And there are people who manage, but it is very difficult. But feeling that sort of pull, like you don't fit into either place, is very like resonant, I think, for a lot of people. And I think too, that sort of pull towards something dark is appealing, because I think to a certain extent everybody knows that feeling, and if you can quantify it in something very obvious like demons and devils, it's a little easier to kind of process. I like them because I like the sort of I call them Asmodean tieflings, the ones that come out of 4th edition with the horns and the tails and stuff, because it is an absolute drawback. Like you can't walk around and pretend you're something else. When you're the tieflings that are subtler, the variant tieflings, like it may never come up. And that might be what you want to play. Like you want to play a character who just has this background, this potential conflict of their birth that doesn't come up much. But if you are, Farida, every time you walk into a room, there's a calculus you're doing, and people are making assumptions about you. And so that becomes a story in and of itself, and an experience that, people in everyday life are familiar with, but made, bigger in a sense, because now you're attaching it to an extraplanar entity and such. And that sort of built-in story, I think, is a big part of it, whichever way you take it. The stuff that the kind of thing that you're going to pick up, I think is really interesting and engaging.
Yeah, I think half elves were especially like in second edition they very much did function in that way. You have these two like, but that does require that your world be like the elves really don't like the humans really don't like the elves, and to create that kind of tension you kind of see in Lord of the Rings or something like that. But
yeah,
like,
it requires like a certain amount of explaining things, right? Like,
yeah,
okay, so the reason this isn't great is because for 1,000 years our people have been at war.
Yeah, these two kingdoms have not been super great. But then you got horns, and I'm resistant to fire, which becomes yeah, it's hard being Hellboy walking into a room.
Yeah.
So is there also something about the aesthetic? I mean, because horns are cool. I mean,
it can't hurt.
Right. I mean, they can't hurt.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, very stabby. What has been kind of like, do you have do you read? I know this is a very weird thing to ask, but have you been like excited about a book this year? Am I allowed to ask that
I
you
just
have read?
I just read Circe by Madeline Miller, and I read it on a whim. Basically, my little son wasn't feeling well, and he fell asleep on me, and the book I've been reading, my paperback, was in the other room, so I pulled out my library ebook app, and it said this was available. I'm like, I haven't been meaning to read that, and I just devoured it. It's really beautiful. It's a sort of a retelling of the myth of Circe. It's kind of a literary fantasy. But yeah, I adored it. And in the same vein, I really loved Piranesi by Susanna Clarke, who did Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. And this is very different. It's a lot shorter. But it was, I found it very affecting. Like it's weird and it's wonderful. And it's about, it's the diaries of this guy he's in this world. It's like it's an endless house that holds the sea, and every room has weird statues. And I was talking to my friend about this because I convinced her to read it, and she's like, I kind of want to like have a D&D game there or an Invisible Sun game there because it has that feel. I'm like, that would be very interesting. But yeah, those are two of the ones I've read recently. I read Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse, which is kind of a it's like a secondary world fantasy with kind of an Aztec feel, and that one's also really good. I'm trying to remember what else. I went to the bookstore with my son to get him a new graphic novel, and I was looking at books. He's like, how about this? I'll pick out 3 books with really cool titles, and then you pick one to take home.
Oh, fun.
So he picked out A Court of Thorns and Roses, The Calculating Stars, and A Kingdom of Liars. And I looked at them all like, I'm gonna buy myself 3 books. It's fine. This is what adults get to do. So so those are my to be read.
I struggle with certain because I've always listened to books as I sleep, and to a certain degree I'm pretty sure I absorb them, but some books are like unlistenable because they're too interesting and I hate them for it. And one of those is This Is How You Lose the Time War.
Oh, that one is so good. It's
and
beautiful.
I like within like 2 seconds I'm like, nope, I'm gonna be up all night.
Gotta be awake for that one.
Yeah.
You know what else I've listened to recently that I love it, and I started listening to it as I fall asleep because I've now listened to it a couple times, is the Murderbot Diaries.
I love me a Murderbot.
So it's sound. I didn't read it for a while because it sounded kind of, I don't know. Yeah. Like sci-fi fighty robots, but no, the idea is it's the main character refers to themselves as Murderbot. They're a construct, so they're part like robot and part like clone material. And
okay, so full disclosure, I have a character named Murderbot.
His
name Murderbot forever for I would say 2 years, and then we started naming him Rend because Rend isn't much better. They kept on having my wife kept on having to introduce him as Murderbot, and that is like, a rough way.
What? Yeah, that's one of the things in this is that this is what Murderbot calls himself, but that's private. But the concept is private. Okay. They don't tell people that.
You can't be like, I'm McStabby return. You can't.
And there's reasons for it, but those are kind of spoilery. But they're what's called a sec unit, so they're security, and they're rented out to people in this sci-fi world who are sort of doing surveying on planets and space exploration, and the point is for that these sec units are given the programming to sort of do risk assessment and stuff, but they have what's called a governor module, and that if they break any rules, it'll punish them. It'll send like an electric shock. And so this one figured out how to hack its governor module. So they can send the signal, but then it doesn't punish. So it's like, okay, now you can't make me do stuff, right? So what I'm going to do is watch a lot of media, like a lot of media. And it's really, they're really cute. Like they're like all kind of, there's a mystery to each of them. And it's all first person, and it's such an engaging voice. But yeah, it's about a robot that watches soap operas and really doesn't like people, but maybe does.
It's a very
so good.
And
they're novellas, so they're short.
Oh, good. No, I like a good novella. Also, novellas are like the perfect script size when anyone needs to translate them into like. I'm pretty sure. I'm forgetting the name of it. Not Android's Dream of Electric Sheep, but what's the drug one where he just goes on like he's in the desert. He's a journalist and he has to cover like the dust derby, and he goes Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Is almost a word for word adaptation. Like no effort was made to turn it into a script. It's just the novella. So yeah, I will have to check out the Murderbot Diaries.
The first one's called All Systems Red. It's delightful.
I reference Prometheus a lot for a movie that I understand is not great, but it has a lot of good ideas. And one of my favorite things is you see David at the beginning of this film, an android who is dyeing their hair and watching Lawrence of Arabia, and is only dyeing their hair blonde because they know they look like Peter O'Toole in that movie, and it's just like already I'm fascinated by whoever this is. I don't care about anyone else. Like we are 5 minutes in. I know the alien shows up. I'm done.
More David, please.
Yeah, this person has issues. This person has a lot going on. What do you ever find yourself thinking of storylines like I want to explore something very different that you haven't gone to explore yet? Like, how distractible are you?
During this pandemic, it's been a little bit. I've started several books, none of them quite feeling exactly right. I do tend to stick with fantasy. That's the sort of storytelling medium I am most into. And so they're all varying shades of that, but I like to play a lot with sort of structure stuff and who tells the story and what flavor. One of the projects that I'm working on is kind of a fantasy murder mystery. So I got to do, because this is another thing, is that a lot of genres have different conventions and expectations of how the story is going to be shaped. And so you can combine a lot of things with fantasy, because fantasy doesn't have as much in the way of like strict story convention compared to like a mystery or like a romance or thriller. Like there are expectations of how this story is going to unfold and where the beats go, or film noir, right?
Probably most strict.
So like when you combine them, like how you combine them is really interesting. And so that kind of thing I like to play with.
I do tend to get inspiration, but I noticed, and I was very surprised. I got lots of messages online about Loki, because I had literally ran everyone through Loki apparently for the last 3 years. And it was almost every episode, and every episode I would get emails like, "Did you work on Loki?" I'm like, "That's so sweet that you would think they would let me do that." But I did not. But there were lots of elements. I do have to say, like, for myself, whenever I have a moment of quote unquote brilliance, that's because if you get enough monkeys with typewriters, I am the Hamlet that will get rid. Like, if you have a vested interest in like, what are trickster gods? What are like the Norn? Who are like the TVA and blah, blah, blah. But I did recently read a book I had never read called The Siege of Mount Nevermind, which is a D&D Dragonlance book. And that is pure chaos because that person explores the mind of a gnome in a way I don't think I wanted to know.
Interesting.
Yes, the level of chaos in those attitudes in a very kind of welcome to a very much government institution, but the government institution frowns upon success. It was I don't know if I'm ever going to come out of that book the same. It changed me. The gnomes damaged my psyche, I will say that much. So is there anything that you're like super hyped and looking forward to other than the job at Idle Champions?
Idle Champions. Yeah. Unfortunately, the thing I'm most hyped for, I cannot talk about yet, which is a bummer. But hopefully
can you be hyped? Audibly so. When is that going to happen? Even more NDA than that. Like I can't even tell you when.
No, it doesn't. Some industries, they just take time. That's how it goes.
All right. Well, I am actively excited for you.
Figure out, that's my hope.
That's fantastic.
The hype will keep.
The hype will keep. Has anything been surprising for you in the writing of the dialogue for any of the champions so far? And how much time have you gone ahead?
I'm not sure exactly when releases happen. I'm working on something that's for a new thing that I don't think none of it has come out yet. So, and then today I'm working on the end of something that's
I'm the worst interviewer.
Yeah.
Let me what's your social security number?
It's a number. It's about 8 digits long.
Excellent. We have something we can now work with. Let's see. I mean, I did try to be like full disclosure. I tried to sneak information out of B Dave, and I appreciate you for
that one. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, I wanted the inside scoop on B Dave's what his favorite gods were, and he's just very tight-lipped about the whole situation.
Favorite non-evil gods specifically.
Yeah. What is it about Champions of Lore that you have enjoyed so much? Because you
really
all look like you're having like the absolute best time.
I really like doing stuff with B Dave and Trevor, like so much so that we went and started a writing podcast. So our writing podcast is called Writing About Dragons and Shit, because I'm terrible at titles, and that was my
suggestion. It's searchable.
Yeah, it's just a good time. I feel like that was a real fortunate chemistry experiment. Like I didn't know, I don't think I'd known B Dave. Oh, I did one thing. I did like a Founders and Legends game with B Dave, and that was it. I'd only played that one game with him, and he was Freely and I was Havilar, and that was good. But I wouldn't have said like, yeah, let's do a show together. I was like, cool, thanks. Like,
not Freely.
It was nice meeting you. And I'd never met Trevor. And so, they asked, do you want to do the show? And we had a quick meeting, like kind of a little light chemistry test kind of thing. And again, it's like, it's fine. And actually, I think our first show, when we had all signed in and got the tech stuff done, I was so nervous, and Trevor was so nervous, and B Dave was like, we have this, it's fine, you guys are great, we're gonna be great. And he's just like, he's got such a good energy that just grounds everything, and from there on, like it was a ton of fun, and I don't think I've been nervous since. Even though occasionally these are topics I'm like, this is new to me, so hopefully I'm not going to mess it up.
Yeah, I mean, like you're having to do research weekly, right? Like to an extent. I mean, I know you have most of this in your head, but like it's like, here's the new topic.
Yeah, some of them too are things like, there was a while there we were doing holidays that were introduced with Waterdeep Dragon Heist. There's 3 sentences. And so it's like, okay, well, what can you talk about that's related to this? Those are fortunate, because then it is easier to go like, well, what do I already know about that I just need a little quick refresher on? But like today was the Cult of the Dragon, which largely I know about because it's been around a long time, right? I've heard of it. But I went and I was like, I don't think I actually know a lot other than they clearly like dragons.
They're super into dragons. They like to
Undead
turn dragons into
dragons.
Dracoliches.
Except now, apparently, that's not their thing. So
I think it still is. But
no, apparently the new leader of the Cult of the Dragon insists that the Dracolich thing was a mistranslation,
right,
and living dragons are now what's up.
Yeah, but there's still a sect of the cult like there's not multiple sects of the Cult of the Dragon.
Of course.
So there is one sect that still wants to make the Dracoliches, but the other one's like, no, that's not it.
I love a schism. That's where the story is in the schism.
It's become chaos. So
you keep an apocalypse cult running for over 1,000 years, you're gonna have to have a little chaos.
I mean, you have to, because you've been promising and not delivering, right? Like you want to start an apocalypse cult like 30 years till, like, you want like a little wiggle room, but after 1,000 years, like, you are failing. Like, you've not brought a product to launch. On that note, thank you so much.
Thank you for
being
having
on Idle
me.
Insights again and putting up with me once again. I'll have more questions about Asmodeus later for you, I'm sure.
Hit me with them.
Teach me how to DM.
You could train me back, because all the DM nitty gritty is not my strong suit.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much for everything you do. Have a great day.
Thank you. Right.